Liebe Leute, willkommen zurück zu Suzerain. Unsere Innenministerin Lilias Graf, die Erzkonservative, ist von ihrem Amt zurückgetreten und hat uns mitgeteilt, oder vorher mitgeteilt, dass sie kandidieren wird um die Parteispitze gegen uns. Und das bedeutet dann entsprechend auch gleichzeitig kandidieren wird als Präsidentschaftskandidatin. Tja ja. Das war irgendwie abzusehen, dass von den Konservativen nochmal ein bisschen mehr kommt. Oder es geht in die nächste Runde oder vielleicht sogar das nächste Kapitel. The Will of the State. Ja, sehr gespannt, was bei diesen Wahlen rauskommt. Granny Graf verbündet sich mit Rumburg und stürzt uns vor der Wahl. Ach so. Ja, darauf kann das natürlich auch hindeuten, dass das gar nicht auf Lilias bezogen war, sondern generell auf die diplomatische Situation. So, World Leaders to gather at Allianz of Nations, calling for a session on the current affairs. World leaders will be gathering at Allianz of Nations next week. The main highlights from the upcoming agenda were announced, and as expected, they will be around the current issues in Eastern Mercopa. In addition to the member states from the region, President Walker, Chairman Malenev will both be delivering their speeches at the assembly. All eyes will turn to Constantium. Aha, Constantium in Kurut, as the historic session will be taking place in the Alliance of Nations headquarter. Also Kurut ist quasi die Schweiz, ja? Schätze ich mal. Neutraler Staat. Sehr angesehen. Hauptquartier der Vereinten Nationen. Gut, ist Schweiz nicht, aber ich glaube, die haben da auch einen... Haben die Vereinten Nationen in der Schweiz einen Sitz? Weiß ich gar nicht hundertprozentig, aber also ist ja in New York ist das Hauptquartier, ne? Aber haben die in der Schweiz auch einen... Ich weiß es nicht. Vielleicht wisst ihr es. So. Ein Report darüber. According to the dates outlined, Sordland 1 is being prepared for the flight to Constantium. Minister of Foreign Affairs David Wishy will be attending the session as well as accompanying Mr. President on the flight. Sehr gut. Und da geht es auch direkt hin scheinbar. Es gibt keine weiteren Ereignisse oder Aktionen, die notwendig wären. Von daher auf ins Flugzeug. David Wishy and I and the rest of the Sordish delegation to the Alliance of Nations arrived in Kurut. The local police escorted us to the Alliance's headquarters in downtown Constantium, immediately recognizable by its gleaming dome. On entering the building, we were met with a parliamentary guide who briefed us about the procedures. After a strict security screening, the staff ushered us to the third floor. We entered the massive circular assembly hall and took our designated seats. David sat next to me. All of the world's most powerful people under one gleaming dome. One wrong word and the world will go to hell. Haha. It's amazing how someone has managed to fill a room with people that absolutely loathe each other. Ob das ein guter Zeitpunkt ist, das Land zu verlassen? Ich weiß nicht, ob er paranoid wird. Ich hoffe nicht. Also ganz so pessimistisch müssen wir ja jetzt nicht sein, oder? Und das stimmt ja schon irgendwie. Ist schon ganz spannend. It is truly astounding. Humanity has come far. Daran möchte ich zweifeln. How are you feeling, Anton? Ever since what happened to Peter, I'm amazed that you've been holding up so well. I've seen you two hanging around all the time in university. Ja, David Wishy war ja unser Prof an der Uni. We knew changing is hard. I managed somehow. He has been more of a friend to me than I could have ever been to him. He was a true friend. Also ja, scheinbar war, aus welchen Gründen auch immer, waren die beiden sehr gute Freunde. Ich verstehe es nicht ganz, aber zumindest so, wie wir den Charakter gespielt haben, passt es halt eigentlich überhaupt nicht zusammen. Er war die ganze Zeit in seine ganzen komischen Machenschaften und Affären verstrickt. I wish I had done more to help him. Ja, irgendwie schon, weil wir ihn so komisch abgesägt haben andererseits und dann halt irgendwie ganz alleine gelassen haben. Andererseits hat er sich auch sehr seltsam in der ganzen Angelegenheit verhalten. Was jetzt aber nicht relativieren soll, was dann am Ende passiert ist, was er sich selbst angetan hat. Tja, we could never expect it to be this way. It is tough to be the president, making harsh decisions and dealing with their consequences. I wish I could have supported you more, but time has been a cruel mistress. What you have done is more than enough. I appreciate all the advice, don't worry, your advice wasn't that good anyway. Don't treat yourself so harshly. From the distance you could see the President of the General Assembly, Mr. Nines, approaching his designated position. Well, the session is about to start. Let's get comfortable. It's going to be a long day. Wie ist es eigentlich mit der Musik? Ist die zu laut? Muss ich es ein bisschen leiser machen? Ach, das, wenn ich hier drehe, ändert das gar nichts für euch, ne? Okay. Ich habe meine Audioeinstellung ein kleines bisschen verändert, deswegen kann es sein, also nicht im Spiel, sondern generell so, kann es sein, dass die ein bisschen zu laut ist. Aber wir machen erstmal weiter. Mr. Nines opened the session with a short speech and called the first speaker to the floor. It is my great pleasure to invite the Prime Minister of Lesbia to address the assembly. Warum ist der denn der First Speaker? Der Track ist lauter als die anderen, ne? Ja, den Eindruck habe ich auch. Komme ich denn von hier aus? Ja. Musik runterdrehen. Patricio Alvarez stood and walked up to the podium as the assembly applauded. Mr. President, it is my pleasure to return to this podium. David leaned in and spoke in a low voice. Let's see how crazy this year's session will get. Warte mal, was war denn mit dem noch? War der von Agnolia war immer betrunken, ne? Aber was war mit dem hier? Einer der 100 reichsten Männer der Erde. Tja. Wie kein richtiger Politiker so richtig, aber es scheint auch nichts durch aus dem Beitrag. Oder dem Eintrag hier im Kodex, was genau das Problem mit ihm war. I'm surprised he isn't drunk. Okay, da gibt es ja dann scheinbar doch die Verbindung. Hä, was war denn aber mit dem anderen dann? Ich dachte, sind die beide immer betrunken? Der andere ist doch die ganze Zeit irgendwie mit seinem Flugzeug rumgeflogen. Ach, oder war das der hier? Kann sein, dass es Alvarez war, der nach Agnolia fliegen wollte und das dann nicht, also ein paar Ehrenrunden über Stahlport gedreht hat. Ah, okay, naja. Stay silent and listen. When I last spoke here, the message I gave was of encouragement and support to this organization and the vital role it plays. Of all the challenges Eastern Mercopa and the whole world has faced since then, one has grown larger and more imminent than any other. The threat of the so-called socialist states and the actions taken by their authoritarian rulers with no regard to international law. A loud noise came from the table of Valksland. I saw Emmerich Hegel pounding his fist on his table in protest, solange es nicht seine Schuhe sind. Wer es nicht weiß, da gab es mal dieses bei den Vereinten Nationen diese Rede von Khrushchev vorne am Pult, wo er seinen Schuh ausgezogen hat und auf das Pult geschlagen hat mit seinem Schuh. Also Khrushchev war Vorsitzender des Zentralkomitees der Sowjetunion. Join in with the pounding. Look, he's an embarrassment. Aber auf wen bezieht sich das jetzt? Auf Hegel? Look like the Chancellor's already mad. Nee, ich denke, wir gucken uns das mal ganz in Ruhe an, was hier so abgeht auf der internationalen Ebene. Today, the need to come together as the leaders of the free world is more important than ever. Ja, the free world. The Contana Security Pact under the leadership of United Contana has been fueling Weichsland military-industrial complex and its expansionist aims in eastern Mercopa. The world turned a blind eye when the armies of Weichsland occupied Helgeland. And they did not stop there. According to our intelligence reports, United Contana made nuclear missiles were quickly deployed to the island. Popcorn, genau. Also, Kuba-Krise steht an. He pulled out a photograph. Even though it was hard to see from my position, I recognized it as an aerial image of Helgeland. We demand that the Chancellor speak the truth. Speaks, muss es heißen. As you can all see, we have evidence of the construction of silos. Keep listening. No Eastern Mercopan nation can accept the installation of weapons of mass destruction in the middle of our Markian Sea. Emmerich Hegel stood up and kept pounding his fist. We hereby call for the immediate dismantling and withdrawal of all missiles and other offensive weapons from Helgeland. We invite all the member states to support our call for resolution in accordance with Article 11 of the Falenko Treaty. A lot of noise came from the assembly hall in response. Most of the Western Mercopan delegates were clapping, while others either shouted in protest or sat in stony silence. Let us also not forget about the recent events that transpired in another state with socialist teachings. A state that wages war against its own citizens. Wählen. Ja, das ist aber jetzt ein sehr weiter Begriff vom Sozialismus. Das hatte ich ja auch schon verwundert da bei dem Eintrag zu wählen. Ja, that's a bunch of horseshit. Wählen is not even socialist. Ja, das denken wir uns, glaube ich, aber wir hören mal weiter leise zu. Der Purge of the Minorities in der... Ja und, Alvarez, du hast auch die Geflüchteten nicht bei dir aufgenommen, möchte ich mal sagen, hä? Hä? Freundchen. The purge of the minorities in their country was again largely ignored by the international community. I would go as far to call it a genocide. No? We violated our past treaties and mobilized their armed forces, deploying them close to our borders and authorizing them to partake in massacres. Lesbia was affected not only by the large wave of refugees coming from Wählen, but by the subsequent government seizure of all of our companies that were active in the country. We hereby call the member states to action against Wählen and its rogue government. Thank you. That was not a bad speech. Mit einer Reaktion positionieren wir uns jetzt gegenüber von Contana und Weichsland. Und oder gegenüber von Acacia. Hat das irgendeinen Einfluss auf unsere Situation? Ich meine, wir haben uns jetzt öffentlich angeboten als Friedenstruppe. Von daher wollen wir, glaube ich, keinen Anteil haben an dieser diplomatischen Eskalation, egal in welche Richtung. Sondern ich glaube, wir wollen uns vermittelnd hier beteiligen. Und einen möglichen Atomkrieg, ich meine, der liegt ja jetzt gerade in der Luft, ja, verhindern. Also wir werden da nicht drauf reagieren. He walked back to his seat amidst enthusiastic applause from most of the Macopian delegates. President Nines waited for the noise to calm down and invited the next speaker, the President of Welt, Victor Smolak. Oh wow, der darf jetzt direkt sich mal dagegen verteidigen. As he walked past Patricio Alvarez, he brushed him aside with an exaggerated sweep of his arms. Ja, gleich prügeln sie sich noch. When he reached the podium, he fumbled with the microphone for a few seconds. Then he smiled at Alvarez mockingly as he raised the height of it. Okay, ja. Na, du Zwerg. Victor is a funny guy. Oh, wow. Stay silent. The real chaos will start now. Ja, ich glaube, da können wir uns ruhig zu äußern. Let's hope not. Victor turned to President Nines and bowed slightly. Mr. President. He then turned back to us and stared out into the hall for a few seconds. Fellow delegates, it is true that the world today faces a multitude of challenges. In the midst of these challenges, the world's most powerful leaders gather here in Kurut. And what do? They make threats, promote hate and spread lies. Is this the alliance of nations we all want? Ja, jetzt appelliert er da an Harmonie und Moral. Where's the cooperation and friendship? Where's the unity? I want to remind you of the wars that the West fought on our soil, of the foreign troops who occupied our country and seized our valuable resources. I want to remind you how they stole the oil from our sacred soil and they did not know when to stop. The ATO soldiers left, but their interference never ceased. They financed armed rebel groups whose only purpose is to create terror inside our country. So, fellow delegates, don't you dare speak about Welt before you acknowledge your involvement in our civil war. Before you acknowledge your own dark past. Ja, da bin ich auf jeden Fall bei 2. Ja, Rayne hat auf jeden Fall einen Sack Popcorn neben sich stehen. Das ist ein leeres Argument. Es rechtfertigt jedenfalls nicht, was Welt da tut. Selbst wenn das alles stimmen mag, rechtfertigt das keine Verbrechen gegen die Menschlichkeit. What did you expect, Mr. President? It's President Smolak. As is well known, after the tremendous tragedy of the Welt Civil War, Acacia made a deal with United Contana where they agreed upon the withdrawal of their troops along with the removal of half of our army. Not only did they weaken us, we were left alone in facing the genocidal Bludish Freedom Front, which the ATO funds together with Romberg. Dass Romberg da beteiligt ist, haben wir ja auch schon erfahren. Just like the delegate before me, I will show you some of the evidence of foreign interference. He picked up a large stack of papers and waved them back and forth. I have clear evidence of direct aid from Romberg to the Bludish Freedom Front. They smuggled tons of KA-74s in Welt. Ja, bei uns auch. Nicht tonnenweise, aber they smuggled in their spies. Smuggled in mercenary commanders. Ja. Okay, aber dann geht's ja um Romberg und nicht um die Bluden. We are not the only ones now. Ja. Let Smolak know I'm on his side. Das ist nicht wahr. He got balls. Taking on Romberg. Das scheint der Modus operandi zu sein, ja. Ich meine, das ist halt deren einfachstes Mittel, die Region zu destabilisieren, ne? Sowohl uns als auch Welt. Und dann können sie ihre offensiven Kriege da umsetzen. Beziehungsweise uns unter Druck setzen, um die Reparation oder was auch immer einzufordern, die sie da haben wollen. We are not the only ones. Ja, aber ich will mich nicht, also das, selbst wenn das stimmt, wenn er auch Beweise dafür hat, will ich mich nicht deswegen an seine Seite stellen und sagen, ja, ist schon alles okay, was du mit den Leuten da gemacht hast. Also hören wir weiter zu. These documents will be published everywhere. Copies have already been sent to the investigative affairs of the Alliance of Nations. I expect this organization to do its task and investigate this properly instead of leaving Velen behind as they have always done. Coming back to the claims of the lesbian representative. First, there is no evidence of civilian massacres by the Veshek forces, nor so-called purges of minorities. Second, the operation was limited only to the militant Bluish Freedom Front, not the Bloods in general. Da haben wir aber anderes gehört. Third, we know your government is also implicated in the funding of the Bluish Freedom Front, and that your oil companies aided their militants during the operation. Okay. Fourth, as the state, we only took what was ours. The companies the delegates spoke of were not only aiding militants, they were brought to Velen by force. Genau, es gibt keinen passenderen Zeitpunkt, das anzusprechen. Ja, absolut. Völlig richtig. Er versucht, die Situation auszunutzen. Die Schuld, also sozusagen den Fokus jetzt von dem, was in Velen passiert, wegzuschieben nach Rumburg und offensichtlich auch nach Lesbia. Know that Velen will no longer recognize the right of any other country to determine what type of weapons we are permitted to possess or what type of policies we follow within our borders. Will er auch Atomwaffen oder was ist los? Velen stands stronger and more united than ever. Our people have spoken. The enemies inside our borders are crushed. Now I ask every delegate here to read our report on the connection to the west with the armed militants in eastern Malkopa, and I ask the Alliance of Nations to do what is right. Velen only wants peace. Our people our people want peace. They are counting on the support and understanding of all the nations of the world. Their proclamation is free Velen or death. The assembly roared, with particularly loud applause coming from the seats of the Rican nations. Was sind denn die Rican? Ja, ich glaube schon. Also, beziehungsweise ja, aber gleichzeitig fordert er es ein von den anderen. Das ist halt auch immer sehr geschickt. Naja. He seems to be popular with Rika, doesn't he? Well, he played the victim here pretty strongly, and his anti-imperialist stance has definitely earned him sympathy from Ricans. Most of that continent has still not achieved stability after gaining their independence from their colonial Southerns. Ah, okay, das soll dann wahrscheinlich Anführungszeichen Afrika sein? Fragezeichen, denn vom Namen her wird es zumindest darlegen und koloniale Ausbeutung ebenfalls, dass die noch nicht allzu lange aufgelöst ist, wobei in den 50er Jahren das natürlich für Afrika historisch noch durchaus der Fall war, Kolonialismus. Genau, er will Opfer spielen und die Schuld auf die anderen lenken. It's easy to forget, it has only been a few years since the revolutions in Rika. Victor slowly walked back to his seat as he applauded himself. He saluted the Rican delegates as he passed them. Next, President Nines invited Martin van Horten to the podium. He walked up to the microphone with quick steps. He was frowning and clenching his fists. I could almost see his jaw trembling. Uh-oh. Erzähl dir Landtime. Nein, wir hören uns das jetzt mal an. Mr. President, fellow delegates of the Assembly and friends, it is an honor to be with you today. I wish we could meet under different circumstances. Once again, the CSP nations, and in particularly Vaxland, have shown us what they are willing to do to achieve their political aims. I must sadly say that the world has left us alone. We were one of the first countries to propose proper cooperation between Eastern Mercopan nations. Yet, when we were threatened by Vaikslandian expansionism, nobody came to our side. Although Mr. Alvarez voiced his indirect support for us earlier in today's session, I can't keep myself from wondering where he was when our lands were under invasion by the very socialists he spoke about. So here I am, asking for the support of the fellow member states of the Alliance of Nations. Agnolia is under attack by Vaiksland. A loud banging noise emerged from the table of Vaikslandian delegates. All of them were pounding their fists on the table. Keep watching. Mr. President, please moderate the assembly. This is more than disrespectful. Emmerich Hegel began shouting curses as Nines repeatedly banged his gavel for order. After a minute of back and forth shouting, the noise settled and Nines allowed Martin to continue. As you all know, Helgeland, which had been a territory of Agnolia for more than 3 decades, was invaded by Vaiksland in a sudden attack. Not only did they unlawfully occupy our land, they brought nuclear missiles to the island the moment our forces retreated. Maldives terror surrounds us on all sides. We must not falter. I invite all member states to find a resolution in accordance with Article 11 of the Valenco Treaty, enforcing the immediate dismantling of all missiles from Helgeland. I must also remind you that under Article 3 of the Ventry City Treaty, the Alliance of Nations must ensure the withdrawal of the occupying force from the island. I call the democratic world to action against the tyranny of millennialism, authoritarianism, militarism and extremism. The banging noise started again. Hegel stood up and approached the rostrum. You are a spineless jerk, a lackey of Acasian imperialism, schreit er. President Nines called for silence and started hitting the gavel. Keep listening. Das ist wirklich so eine Popcorn-Sitzung hier. All of your complaints against us are a direct result of your capitalist and neo-colonialist systems. President Nines, please, what is this? President Nines smacked his gavel in vain as the shouting match broke out in the assembly. Finally, after a few minutes, the other Vaikslandian delegates convinced Hegel to sit back down. I believe I don't need to speak more about this subject. Everything is clear as day. Mr. Hegel's actions speak volumes about the reality of Vaiksland and their corrupted ideology. I hope to see this conflict resolved with the help of the Alliance of Nations soon. He quickly left the podium and nodded to the other Agnolian delegate. The two left the assembly hall. Ah, okay. Order! Order! President Nines announced the next speaker, Emmerich Hegel. Hegel immediately took his place and spoke in a low, seething tone. Thank you. Buckle up, it's the Chancellor's time now. Stay silent. Here we go. First of all, I want to extend a due welcome to the new states from Rica that have joined this organization. After fighting for years against colonialism and imperialism, they more than earned our membership vote. I am overjoyed to see them finally represented in this assembly. As our members grow and more states are represented in this stage, we come ever closer to finding resolutions to the conflicts that plague us. For hundreds of years, the dominant economies of Mercopa raised, pillaged and exploited the continents of Rica and Xina. Okay, also Afrika und China wahrscheinlich, oder Asien. Sadly, Vaiksland was also a part of this plunder in the years before the revolution, when it still clung to the idea of imperialism. But when our masses found their voice, the old colonial powers and their new finances turned against them. These powers did whatever they could to hamper our revolutions. They did not want the people to be heard. They are scared of us for showing the possibility of a better path. Of course, they don't want us to succeed. We threaten the productivity that runs on the blood and sweat of their working class. And now they have started labeling us the aggressors. Ja, er macht genau das Gleiche. Yet we all know it was the Acadians who built up military bases all around Macopa. Ja gut, das stimmt natürlich. Wir haben ja in Lesbia Kampfflieger, glaube ich, stationiert. It was the ATO that was first formed to fight against Millennialism. Ja, completely right ist er nicht, aber er hat auch nicht ganz unrecht. Aber das ändert natürlich nichts daran, dass ein Territorialkrieg und Atomwaffen irgendwie gerechtfertigt werden. Helgoland was, is and will be Vaxlandian territory. Our intervention in the island was completely justified. Mr. Delegates brought up... was? Mr. Alvarez soll das wahrscheinlich heißen. Hieß der Alvarez? Ich glaube. Ja, Alvarez. Brought up the Falenco and Ventry City Treaties. However... Ach nee, er bezieht sich auf beide, glaube ich. Mr. Delegates. Okay, dann ergibt es Sinn. However, they are forgetting about the Treaty of Constantium. Weichsland exercised its right to intervene on behalf of our people who were being oppressed and massacred by the Agnolian government, just because they did not recognize an appointed governor. They didn't get to elect one. We acted in full accordance with the second article of the treaty. If there's a side to be blamed, it is the state which murders its minorities for publicly showing support to our nation. There were also claims about illegal missiles. No country in the world has the right to determine what type of weapons we import. If there's a conflict the Alliance can resolve, let's start with the Acadian base on Rathnos Island. Lesbia has been housing Acadian troops and missiles by our border for years, and none of the member states even talked about it. I also want the member states to look into the Acadian bases in Lesbia. And if the Alliance of Nations truly claims to have the people's best interests at heart, they cannot stay silent about what the Agnolia government did in Helgoland, how they took away the rights of our people. Perhaps then there can be proper dialogue between our nations, and the Alliance of Nations can finally demonstrate that it can serve its intended purpose. But unfortunately, the Alliance of Nations remains all too willing to overlook such human rights violations. However, the Vaxlandian government is ready as always to fight the forces of oppression and colonial servitude on behalf of free people everywhere. He raised his left fist. E revoluten vescore. Oh, guck mal, das ist ja eine sehr ähnliche Sprache, hä? Ah, das Sordisch? Genau, fragen wir mal. He said the revolution will come, yes, but it was an old Valgisch. Ah, darüber kommt wahrscheinlich die Sprachverwandtschaft. Da könnte man in einer Gegenrede ansetzen gegen alle Aggressoren, ja. Alle haben valide Punkte, Unrecht angesprochen, aber nicht alle Mittel sind gerechtfertigt. Genau. Genau. Very similar to Sordish, right? Some words are even written the same way, but I'm surprised you caught that from his accent. Most of the delegates from Xena, Rika and Contana responded with thunderous applause. President Nines announced the next speaker, Queen Beatrice Livingston. The Queen of Rumburg. Naja. Da bin ich ja mal gespannt jetzt. Dear President of the Assembly, dear delegates, dear leaders of the world. Just as my fellow Eastern Mercopan delegates spoke about the troubles plaguing our continent, I also have to bring attention to the plight of the people of the North. The Alliance of Nations, the ATO, the CSP and even the OMEC have never supported our people, when they've been through tragic atrocities. Oh, will sie auf diese Kriegsverbrechen hinaus? Unlike many of the Western countries here, we never received financial aid, when natural disasters struck our lands. Okay, da ging es noch nicht um den Krieg. The pain of our people was never recognized, not even when they faced the threat of genocide by the hands of the Sordish king. Jetzt kommt sie darauf zu sprechen. In light of all that, I implore this alliance to take a closer look at the actions of our southern neighbors. They took in traitors and gave them protection. Ja, da geht's um den Whistleblower. Their president even went so far as to blame our country for spying on his administration, through his own private secretary. And he expects the world to believe his lies. Point of order, Mr. President! Mr. President! Wollen wir uns an dem Schreikonzert beteiligen? Ich glaube nicht. Wir hören uns das ruhig an. I hereby invite all of you to determine the initiation of a proper intergovernmental investigation into Sordland. If the Alliance continues to shirk its given duties, you can trust in Romberg to take matters into her own hand. It is also important to point out that Romberg will not stand idly by if more Kontanen and Acadian military are transferred to Eastern Makopa. Ist das vielleicht ein Ansatz, um mit denen zusammenzukommen? I hereby condemn both the CSP and ATO for trying to influence our region with their military power. Before I finish, I also want to say, Mr. Smolak, I'm looking forward to reading your report. I wonder what this so-called evidence is all about. Ah, okay. Sie ist, im Grunde ist die gegen alle, ja? Know that your slander does not work on us. Know that we are ready to die for our freedom. Know that our kingdom stands firm and strong. Expect a grand awakening. Gott, was ist das für eine Formulierung? Thank you. Das war die schlechteste Rede, die ich je gehört habe. Großes Erwachen? That sounded like a threat. She left the rostrum without getting much applause. Then President 9 spoke my name. Mr. Anton Rayne, President of Sordland, I invite you to address the assembly. David immediately started applauding. Good luck, Mr. President. Und die Rede, liebe Leute, die machen wir in der nächsten Folge. Ich wünsche euch wie immer alles Gute und bis dann. Euer Jan.